Alright guys, in this video I'll be explaining why Biden's new tariffs could have zero impact on NIO. Why NIO is actually immune to these tariffs and all these kind of sanctions and all that kind of stuff. NIO has been preparing themselves for this for the past 4 years. Alright, so they've been waiting for, this kind of stuff to happen. So if you guys didn't already know, the U.S. is set to announce new tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. The Biden administration could raise the tariffs on electric vehicles from China to 100% from the current 25%. And this is all in aims to help protect American auto manufacturers, which is, in my opinion, very, very dumb because Tesla's, surviving and doing well here in China. There's no tariffs on Tesla. Imagine if China came out with 100% tariffs on Tesla. Then, the American outlets would be like, "Oh no, what are they doing? They're so anti-American." Jesus Christ. You see the double standard going on over here, right? So the Biden administration is set to announce the new tariffs, which is as high as 100%, and additional import taxes on other Chinese goods, including semiconductors, as early as next week, possibly even on Tuesday. All right, and this is amid concerns within the administration that products from China could undercut American products with these cheap solar panels, batteries, electric vehicles flooding the market, and that could hurt American companies. I call BS, man. If you want fair market competition, right, there shouldn't be any tariffs. And wouldn't it be much better for the industry, for consumers, if they had the option to purchase a NIO or purchase a BYD, taking away that choice, slapping on a 100% tariff does nobody any favors, right? It also means that the traditional American automakers, they can keep prices high. That's not good for the consumer. If there were Chinese electric vehicles being sold in the U.S., that would really, really help, create some good competition. It's healthy competition, and that could, make these companies innovate more, right? And I'm sure that most of you guys watching this video would be very happy to buy a NIO or have a NIO house in your city where you can rest, check out the cars, participate in some fun events, and that would be absolutely amazing, right? So this is, of course, both President Trump and President Biden have been placing tariffs on China, and they've been going ham. They do not want Chinese companies to succeed in the U.S. And this is where NIO has been preparing themselves for the past 4 years. So before I even took delivery of my car, my NIO EC6, back in 2020, I was able to interview a NIO owner who actually had 2 NIOs, and he was also pretty close to the CEO. And he talked about why NIO is self-developing everything. And it is the fact that NIO was able to see what happened to Huawei. Huawei was rising, they were becoming successful, but then their success had an over-reliance of Western technology. For example, Google, right? And then also their Kirin chips that relied on the ARM architecture, and they got too successful, and then the Americans threw down the hammer on them. And unfortunately, that really hurt them. And the Americans sanctioned Google, prevented them from working with Huawei, sanctioned ARM, prevented them from working with Huawei. So both on the software and hardware front for Huawei phones, they got absolutely hammered. And that just hurt them real bad. So NIO, seeing that this is what the Americans do to them, well, they got to prepare themselves for it. So how do they prepare themselves for it? Of course, they do self-developed things. All right, NIO has always been going ham on R&D, which, yes, it does translate to very high expenses, but this ultimately will pay off to a day where if, for example, Biden or Trump eventually sanctions NVIDIA or these auto manufacturing part makers from working with Chinese EV makers, well, NIO is going to be the one that survives because NIO self-develops pretty much everything now. Before, they used to use Bosch's suspension, air suspension. They now self-develop their own air suspension. Before, they used to use Brembo brakes. There was a very high reliance on that. But then starting from the ET5 and onwards, they developed their own brakes with similar performance metrics. Before, right, and even currently, the cars being sold right now, it uses NVIDIA's Orin X chips. And NIO's chips, all right, NIO orders about 46% of all NVIDIA Orin X chips that NVIDIA produces. That's how many chips that NIO uses, all right, from NVIDIA. So a big portion of NVIDIA's Orin X sales go to NIO, 46%. That is a huge reliance, and that could come in jeopardy if Biden or Trump says, NVIDIA, you're not allowed to work with Chinese companies. Boom, that's really going to hurt NIO, right? Well, what does NIO do? Of course, self-develop their own chip. They've been working on their own chip since 2020, since 2019. That's how far back it goes. I had a video from way back then telling you guys that their ultimate plan was to develop their own chip. All right, that video was back in early 2021. And that was, of course, not only to boost their own margins, because it's much cheaper to make their own chips than to buy it from someone else, but also to protect themselves from this eventual outcome that, Biden could raise prices or sanction these companies from working with NIO. So in that aspect, NIO has been preparing themselves all this time. And yes, these tariffs could hurt NIO's stock price. It would hurt all Chinese EV makers in general. But please understand that, with sanctions and all this kind of stuff, NIO is actually in the best position out of all the other automakers because of their self-developed things, all right? They do not have any reliance. Well, they do still have some, but they do not have that much reliance on foreign companies, and they can make things themselves. And that's going to be a continuous thing going forward. Going forward, they're going to be self-developing everything. Everything is going to be self-developed. And essentially, NIO will become sanction-proof. Sanction-proof. That's the key word here. All right? So there's nothing that's going to be able to hinder NIO's success going forward, even with sanctions and this kind of tariffs and all that kind of stuff. Yes, other guys will be severely affected, but NIO will not be severely affected. NIO will not be that affected at all because they have prepared and they've witnessed Huawei get severely hurt by these sanctions, and they've been preparing themselves for the past 4 years. So, these tariffs, yes, they could hurt NIO's stock price a little bit, but in general, NIO as a company, sanctions and tariffs, they've been getting ready for this for a while. All right? So don't be too worried about that. NIO's going to do very well. They're going to survive. There's nothing that Biden can do that will destroy NIO. Don't worry about that. But hopefully, you guys can vote him out. Vote these clowns out of the office. These guys that promote deglobalization, right? These extreme tariffs that is preventing NIO from entering the U.S. That is just something that nobody wants to see. As always, stay safe, stay healthy. Peace out.